growth is not comfortable. I love what John Maxwell says. This was a quote that I sat in for a year in one of my journals, and it was that if growth is expected, then change is essential. It was a year I was really struggling a little bit with. I wanted to grow, but some of the change that I was having to walk through for that growth to happen was very uncomfortable.
Right.
So I began to tell myself that I want the growth more than I want the uncomfortable essence of what change is, because it's essential. In other words, you cannot grow without change. You can change without growing, but you cannot grow without changing.
Right.
So if I step into a place in a year or a season of time where I know that there's something I need to change in my life, and I know that growth needs to happen in me, and I know that's going to probably yield some pretty uncomfortable opportunities because that's how it happens, then it's really important for me going into that. It's really important for you going into that with me to have that conversation about what my recharge cycle is.
Well, welcome to Pillow Talk. I'm Grant. This is my wife, Stephanie. And after almost 38 years of marriage, we've discovered how to communicate for better understanding and yoke our differences to pull stronger toward a common purpose.
As certified marriage coaches, we want to help reignite passion and connectedness in your marriage through intimate, authentic, and unguarded conversations. Now let's have some pillow talk.
Let's do it. Hey, welcome to Pillow Talk with Grant and Stephanie. We are back again, and we are continuing our series on the 15 ways/laws, because I've called it both things, to thrive in marriage. And so we are looking forward to today. We're going to talk about kind of the environment that we set around our marriage determines a lot of how we grow in our marriage and excel.
You know, this is a favorite for me because anytime I think about environment and growth, what do I think about my gardens?
Oh, that's true.
Let's talk about this again.
You don't tend to like it when I grow. I mean, it's like
only when my gardens grow.
Only when the gardens grow.
I just love how God gives us that picture right outside our front door.
Absolutely. And the fact is, you do an amazing garden.
Oh, thank you.
I don't like gardening, even though my name is Gardener, but there is nothing more peaceful than sitting out in your gardens.
Thank you.
You create a great atmosphere there.
Thank you.
So right there's your environment. And, you know, that environment has created tons of peace in our marriage. It's created, I love what you said one time before, you heard it from somebody else, but the part, if you want something, you have to create the environment that draws it in. Can you kind of expound on that real quick?
Actually, Scott Fay.
Yeah.
His book, The Sweet Spot, and Discover Your Sweet Spot. And he was talking about how that just like we would, if we want butterflies, I'm going to paraphrase what he said, but this is what was initially given to me by him in a conversation from his book, that if I'm looking for butterflies in my garden or bees in my garden, I can't expect that if I don't create the atmosphere that attracts them. So what I create attracts, what I pursue eludes me. So if we are, so in the process of change and transformation and growth that we're talking about this week, it's the environment that we create that will attract the change that will then help us in our transformation. If I am chasing change, if I'm pursuing change to get you to change, it's going to elude me. But when I all of a sudden create the environment that gives you the space and the pace to be comfortable in that, then that organic change is going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I like that. It's you know, it all falls back to what we talk about a lot, and definitely with other couples when we're just talking to them, that you can only control one person, and that's you. We were talking to one of our pastors at FIO this weekend. And don't ask me to spell that. I can actually. But
we can.
What we were talking about with him, or what I was talking about with him while you were discussing with Brandy, I said that, and it kind of just came to me, you know, it's amazing. We want control of everything. But we only have control of one thing, and that's ourselves. And we're not even good at that.
We're terrible at that because we so want to control everybody else.
Yeah. So our focus is on, she's not making me happy, or she's not fulfilling me, whatever it is. And so therefore, what can I do to make her fulfill me? And the thing is how can I be the husband that she wants to fulfill, that she wants to bring love into?
And I think that comes back to communication, which is what Pillow Talk is. It's authentic, intimate, unguarded conversations. And this is a crucial one because if there is something I feel like you are not stepping up to the plate with, vice versa, this goes both directions. it's not about me to try to change you and pursue that change. It's about me to ask the questions.
hmm
You know, I think that this is something that I know in the past you've tried to lean into, but what can I do? What kind of environment can I give you that becomes a positive and a supportive environment and not a judgmental
Right.
environment? Sometimes when we're trying to change somebody, it's very judgmental because all we can see is the negative of what they're not doing.
Right.
And so there's so many examples of that. But
Oh, and before we go into those, do you think the gender, and I don't mean this in the weird sense that we're hearing gender every 5 seconds, but in a sense, almost a gender swap has been taking place over the last 15, 20 years from the women's lib side of, I can do anything a man can do and I can probably do it better, so the man tends to just lay down because the environment's telling him,
oh, that's true.
don't fight back. So he almost becomes more feminine as she becomes more masculine. And all of a sudden, and I'm not saying the woman should do the dishes all the time. She should do all the cooking. I mean, I do some of that.
Absolutely. It's a shared load.
Yeah, we share the load. But the fact that we don't have kind of a gender assignment makes it harder for you to know what you can do to create that environment. Sure. It makes it harder for me to know what I can do to create the environment for you. Because all those things it's only more natural as the stronger of the two. If someone has to climb up on the roof, yeah, you can do it, but that's my role. And it's not because I'm a man. It's just because my physical attributes, which is
in our case, definitely.
Yeah, it creates that, So
yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, jump in.
I think that we talked before about this in our. Sorry, we're trying to fix our sound here. It's getting really.
I think I went too far on that.
We went too far. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
We've talked before about knowing the space and the pace of your spouse, and I think that this is a great place to really dive into this. This is where it's great to know your husband or wife's. Are they introvert? Or are they an extrovert? Are they inspired by certain types of music? Are they how is their what's their recharge cycle? What's the replenishment cycle? These are the things we're talking about, because if you know there's some change that needs to take place in your life, more often than not, change is not comfortable. Growth is not comfortable. I love what John Maxwell says. This was a quote that I sat in for a year in one of my journals, and it was that if growth is expected, then change is essential. It was a year I was really struggling a little bit with. I wanted to grow, but some of the change that I was having to walk through for that growth to happen was very uncomfortable.
Right.
So I began to tell myself that I want the growth more than I want the uncomfortable essence of what change is, because it's essential. In other words, you cannot grow without change. You can change without growing, but you cannot grow without changing.
Right.
So if I step into a place in a year or a season of time where I know that there's something I need to change in my life, and I know that growth needs to happen in me, and I know that's going to probably yield some pretty uncomfortable opportunities because that's how it happens, then it's really important for me going into that. It's really important for you going into that with me to have that conversation about what my recharge cycle is. If I'm growing, I'm going to need a space to breathe too, right? So it's important for you to know if that there's space carved out every week, and you're really good about this, where there's peaceful and quiet, where there's just music playing. It's not TV 24/7, that I have some alone time because that's how I recharge, or that we have outdoor time, which is the gardens. Flipping that, you recharge with, you love to be in a social environment. You're very charged up by high energy music and by just lots of different variety. So I think both of us knowing that, we've been able to level that playing field a little bit, and we can say, hey, I'm really stepping into some decisions I have to make in the next few months. I'm not sure about this. Well, that tells you I need to be really intentional about making sure this environment suits that for me,
right,
and vice versa. So I think that that's some great things that you can step to very easily, asking the questions of knowing how your spouse recharges. And that can be music. I mean, music was created by God to minister to us and to bring peace. And, let's face it, there's so much different kind of music out there. And just because I don't like it doesn't mean it doesn't bring peace to somebody else. But if it's grating on me, it's not going to put me in a place of peace where
Well,
I can be
and
quiet.
like for us, we set the environment depending on what we're doing.
Sure. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, we have like some fairly hard rock
Yeah.
music. We like when we're on
Our
vacation
visuals,
driving,
yeah.
boom, we put in the
Yeah.
stuff that you don't listen to at praise and
Any
worship time,
energy.
you know.
Nope, because it's not praise and
It's
worship.
definitely not praise and worship, but it just creates that
The high energy.
high
in it,
energy, and that's
But you're right. When I'm in a space of really hearing from God and I'm really stepping into something, I have very specific praise and worship artists and albums, and it's
mhm,
not all worship, it's praise too, but it's very specific
yeah.
to what fires me up. So recreation, the activities that would give each other energy, and that can vary. Friends, who are the friends that encourage us?
Oh, definitely.
We had dinner the other night with some great friends, Brandy and Afaya, and that was such a powerful. We both share in that particular mix. Both of those people energize both of us, so
Mhm.
that's a powerful place. Now we don't get to do it all the time, but that's huge to know.
Yeah, we don't
in a
get to do it
marriage.
enough, but it's things we try to manage for, even though it doesn't
Right.
always happen.
Right, because it's in a powerful
You know,
space.
we talked about going to the ultimate intimacy
Mhm. Yeah, that's
retreat,
right.
and one thing we did is we set aside with our very good friends, Julie and Greg. I was having Nick and Amy's name going through my head.
Like you forgot Greg's name?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know who he is. No, we set aside, extra time with them, and to do that was it recharges and it sets the environment. For one thing, it sets in a growth environment because they
I was about to
challenge
say
us.
challenge us. Absolutely. That's what I was going
And
to say. They
yeah,
challenge us. And what's interesting about that is anytime we do a space like that, I come back and within 2 or 3 days, bam, there's something there that's just really in front of me that I get to step into, and it really challenges me. But I feel like I'm prepared for that.
yeah,
Like because we're intentional about creating those friends and those experiences and those environments, then what we're talking about here, the law of the environment, then in our marriage it thrives because we each begin to thrive in those environments.
yeah.
And it's kind of like a garden. Once you create kind of the culture of that
Hmm.
space, I think culture is a great way to say that, it begins to perpetuate growth. This year, we've been in this house for 2 years, and I was very intentional the first year we lived here. And I invested some time and money into very specific plant products into our front garden. And this year, I haven't had to plant anything
Hmm.
because as I cultivated that and created that culture of growth, it has it has it has done it on its own.
Yeah.
So what
Starts building a momentum.
it builds momentum, and so then it's a matter of tweaking and adding to it
Right.
and nurturing that. And so that's what you can do in a marriage. The first few attempts at this, I think attempts is a great word because you're going to fail,
Hmm.
but you fail forward, you learn, and when that's a great part of the environment is to create an environment of failure.
Yeah. Well, I was
Honestly.
talking to our daughter this last weekend and asked her, I said, well, how's your garden doing? And she says, it's just a trial. She
I love
says,
that.
every
Yeah.
every year I try something a little different
Yeah.
so I can have a better product the next year.
So good.
And so that's kind of what keeps our marriage alive is not allowing it to become stale and just living with the same old all the time.
Right.
If you're thinking of, well, it's all just the same, same wife, same life, you know, well, then you need to generate a new environment for that same life, because there's no reason
Absolutely.
for that to become stale in any area of your marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that goes into so many different things. There's so many questions that you can ask in a marriage. We won't go through all of them tonight, but this is such a great space to cover all the domains of your life
Yeah.
in marriage. And we've kind of just hit on a few there: music, thoughts, experiences, friends, recreation, soul. What spiritual exercises
Hmm.
strengthen your soul? Maybe it's going to church together. We've talked about this before. For some couples, it's literally holding hands and praying together. For other couples, it's something different.
Right.
It's attending retreats and conferences together and talking about that and
Yeah.
growing in that.
And I
I
want
think
to,
that's
really encourage everyone to find out what works for you. Don't just take what
Yeah.
everybody else says they're doing. For one thing, some of them are really doing it. Some of them are claiming to do it, and they're not really doing it because they want to fit in with the norm. Okay.
Or they have an intent to. It's just they haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, so there's all those different things. For us, we just learned what works for us in a lot of areas, and we're still working out. We're still tweaking every one of those. I like to go back to thoughts for just a little bit. Over the last couple of years, us working on what we're thinking about really creates an environment for intimacy with us.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I'm talking about across the board, emotional, intellectual, everything. Because we literally create an environment. And what we do with that is we wait till it starts to get dark. We light some candles. We fix a nice dinner. We sit down and we talk, and we just let it go. What have you been thinking about? What have you been talking about? And it usually goes into an area we didn't start off.
Oh yeah, it's so cool.
But
How
the
that
best
happens.
ones do.
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah, because we give ourselves that space, and we do it at a time of the week where we're not going to be interrupted by work. That's
Mhm.
huge. If you own a business like or work for somebody where
Right.
you are like the owner, that's huge. But so many things come up. You know, we talk about our giftedness, we talk about our home, we talk about our hopes and dreams, we talk about memories.
Mhm.
There's times we just have conversations and laugh about remember when, because we've been together since we were babies.
Yeah.
And so I think so, you know, those are some areas that you can look at that can start to cultivate and design and create the environment for growth. Maybe you haven't
Right.
talked about as a couple. And then how do you live that though? If we have time, I love these things here that John Maxwell talks about as we apply these to marriage specifically. I think they're good. It's being responsible for your own change, live in it. You know, we talked
Yeah.
about that. So as we become responsible to help each other create and maintain an environment, it's still ultimately up to me
Mhm.
to work on my own self. So real quickly, we won't go into these, but I liked this. If you change yourself but not your environment, your growth will be slow and difficult because you're going to have to go through the weeds
Right.
and the rough soil and the rocks.
Mhm.
If you change your environment,
Let's stay there just a second.
Okay.
So if you can start working on yourself, but not creating the atmosphere for a good marriage. So
Mhm.
as I start to change and I want to be the
Mhm.
person that you love, but I still bring the everything you say irritates me to the
Mhm.
table, or and let's say you're one of those that you have to have dinner waiting for me when I get home. I still bring that, and that's not the case.
That's
But
a good example.
but if I bring it to the atmosphere when I come home, then immediately you're on your heels for the rest of the
Mhm.
night, no matter what I say or do. If I can brag about the meal, but if I still came in
With the expectation.
irritated that it wasn't
Yeah.
on the table when I
Yeah.
got home,
Yeah.
it creates the wrong
So
environment.
you didn't change the environment.
Right.
You try to change. You're like, well, I'm trying to change, but you're not doing anything to the environment. It's going to be really slow and
Right.
difficult. So then if you change your environment, but not yourself, then growth will be slow and less difficult. So you can, it's actually, if you start to change the environment, even if it's a little slow on your personal change side, it's
Mhm.
actually going to be a better for the spouse. It's kind of
Right.
interesting. If you change your environment and yourself, then growth will be fast and successful. Understand that most people are not interested in actually growing. I think that's
Right.
the thing. Most people in marriage, once they've been married after a year or so, as humans, we're done. We're done with things.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how many people we talk to that the idea of growth in marriage after a few years is just like an anomaly to people. They
don't even truly
don't
understand it.
understand what growth in your marriage is. So this is why we're talking about this, because we want your marriages to grow.
Mhm.
We want you to create the environment so growth can become habitual, so that your marriage can thrive,
Yeah.
and so that it begins to be reproducible. Motivation, you know, that it just
Mhm.
continues. It begins to be nourished on its own because you know what to put into it,
Right.
and it becomes a different habit.
Well,
You're
it's just no
switching up
different than
that.
your garden. You know, if every year you planted cactus, that's the only plant you can't grow.
That is the only one I can't
So,
grow very well.
so you kept planting cactus every year,
Yeah.
trying to have a cactus garden, and every year it died. Before too long, you're going to quit putting forth that
I
effort.
would say, well, my garden does. I'm not a gardener.
Right.
And people tell me that all the time.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Well, I can't keep plants alive. Well, do you even try?
Right.
Do you try something different besides just looking at it sitting on
Yeah.
your table? So same with
Are
marriage.
you watering?
Yeah. Are you watering it? Are you asking questions? Marriage isn't a trial from the standpoint of you're trying out the person. It's a continual trial of how can I make it better?
Right.
That's where it's a trial.
Yeah.
So that's where you have to bring failure into it, because failing forward is the only way.
Yeah.
When you make a failure, you grow. Like, well, that didn't work, but we'll
Mhm.
try this instead. So I think too, when we're developing a growth environment, when we're in this space, what are your thoughts on, we talk about this a lot, being accountable and holding each other accountable for that growth? In other words, if I am being very intentional about creating an environment, then how accountable is that for you to use that environment and to grow?
I think for me, it's saying, okay, what's your love language? So if you're going through all that effort, but you're not being affirmed that it means something to me, then all of a sudden you feel like, why am I even doing it? Except for your own personal needs. Well, that causes you then to become selfish. Well, then that selfishness is going to bleed over into every other area of our lives. So it's very important for me to come in and say, I recognize the garden. I recognize the table. And it's even more important for me to say, I love that garden because this is what it does for me. This is what it does for our family, or I love the way you decorate the house because it creates an atmosphere of peace for me, because then you immediately say, oh, that he sees why I'm doing it,
And it
not
holds me
just that I'm
accountable
doing it.
to,
Right.
yeah. But it also holds you accountable.
Hmm.
If I'm doing something very intentional that's maybe not natural for me to create. If I come in and make sure that your favorite TV program's on, or I don't whine about the favorite TV program being on, or I know it's the
Right.
space you need to be in, if I am intentional about allowing of creating that
Hmm.
peacefulness in that area, then that means you're now accountable to use that space.
Yeah.
Too, right?
It also makes me responsible to look to pay attention to you, because there's days you will be willing, but it's not where you're at.
Mm.
There's been multiple times you walk in and I just felt, okay, there's too much noise in the room for her right now,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm good at catching it. Sometimes I'm not,
But that's okay. I mean, and that's part of me helping to create that environment is also to know that, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. This isn't for me right now. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being accountable, and I think there's nothing better in the world than two are better than one, that the accountability partner is here. If you will
Right.
choose to be accountable to and for your spouse,
Mm-hmm.
then that is one of the biggest things in humankind, is to have somebody to hold you accountable. I have friends that like me to hold them accountable for certain specific things in their life, and which is fine. But how amazing is that to have your spouse right here and say, I am struggling with this. I need you to help me, number one, create an environment and a pathway through this, and number two, hold me accountable for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge.
No,
Huge,
I
huge, huge.
100% agree. No, that's very good. Another thing that we need to do is we need to be focused in the moment
Mm-hmm.
when we're going through things, and it's real easy not to be. There's just some things that's if we're always focused on the past
Mm-hmm.
instead of on the future. I mean, I think the present's good a lot. The past is good occasionally, but the future is always good.
Yeah.
And we need to always have be setting the environment for growth into our dreams.
Into
Yeah.
the forward movement, not the backward fall.
Right. You look back to say, okay, this is what we need to work on. Then you need to move on and work on it. The Bible even says, remembering the former days when you were enlightened. Okay. But then what were you enlightened about? How are you applying what you're enlightened about? And it's real easy for us to just say, oh, man, those were the good old days.
Yeah. History is really just more for a lesson. It's not for present. Does that make sense? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's like even we talk about what we learn from history. You do learn from history,
Right?
But you don't live in the history.
Right.
You learn from it, and that should be something
Mm-hmm.
that you appropriate in a better way in the future as things transition, as times change. Today I was reading, and I don't know if this is totally in tune with what we're saying, but it just jumped into my head. In Psalms 103, I think it's verse 5, it talks about how that God gives us, I'm trying to think of the way the King James words it basically, but the Amplified says he gives us the necessity and the desire for the present season and age of our life. So my point of all that is God doesn't change, but he's so multifaceted that what was something in the past, because it was a different season of our life, worked, that can shift, and he can take something completely different and that be what he provides in the necessity and the season of age that I'm in. So
Right.
that yields much into transformation, because that's what transitions are.
Yeah.
And in a marriage, the transitions of marriage that we navigate have everything to do with right now. Now is the most important moment that we have in our life, you and I, right now,
Mm-hmm.
today.
It's only when you're in
Today
total control
matters.
of.
Today matters.
Yeah.
And so instead of always saying, putting myself to go back and yeah, but this is how God had me do this. Look, no, God, now my necessity has changed. And I heard Pastor Miss Deleva George teach that years ago. And as a woman, that was so powerful, because I thought, man, my necessity, the necessity of what I need and the desire at the specific present moment in my life is what God is working on in right now.
Yeah.
I loved that, because it changes.
Yeah.
And that's part of the growth environment, is allow God to be present in your present.
Yeah.
So that your future can be thriving.
Can be a present.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. We want to write that one down.
Anyway, so that was a little bit.
No, that was really good.
Stuttery there, but yeah, I just
no,
love that.
I love that.
So, final thoughts. I think as we're talking about growth, I always like to, for me, I love when somebody teaches something and they give me ideas of what to be leaning into, but then also things of how to overcome. What are some check marks and some markers? And I think that as we're growing, we're going to have growing pains, and it's okay. So it's important to recognize things that maybe we think are negative that are actually part of the growth process that we should be embracing. And I'm just going to maybe 4 or 5 here, and just as you're listening to this, mentally say true or false to these questions, because these are things that we can look at as negative, but when I'm done, I think you'll see that they are very, very conducive to growth. Number one, others are ahead of me.
Yes.
True or false? In your environment of growth, are others ahead of you?
Right. And that was one of our life plan / reboots. That we were higher level. That's right. So
so that it should be true. You do want others to be ahead of you. I am continually challenged in a good way. Yes. In a good way. Yes. That needs to be true. My focus is always forward.
Yes.
Now, we want that to be. There's days it doesn't feel like it, but we do. The atmosphere that I am growing in is affirming. If you're saying false to that, then you need to ask the next question. Well, what does affirming look like to me? And how does that conversation look like with my spouse, so that can become affirming? Because it is important to be affirmed in the way that you identify that.
Yes.
I'm out of my comfort zone. Okay, now we talk about this. You don't want to be out of your strength zones. Okay?
Right.
But to be out of your comfort zones while being in your strengths is powerful. So that's a yes. It's like Tiger Woods. His weakness, let's say, was or his what was the thing? Putting is his.
Yeah, it's just what he doesn't want to practice his forehand in tennis to help his golf become better. But what he does want to do is practice the weakness in his strength. So if that's putting, chipping, driving, whatever it is,
so that's going to be outside your comfort zone if it's something that you feel like you have to work on, or because it's not comfortable for you. But that again goes back to what we talked about earlier in this podcast too. And then what about failure is not my enemy? If you are out there right now and you feel like, and I was this way for decades, it's taken me a long time to get over this hurdle, that failure was my enemy. Like, I can't fail. I can never make anything but an A. It has to be the very top. Part of that's because I'm an achiever. That's part of my strength. But failure is my friend, not my enemy.
Yeah. That's good. Let's expound on that one just a little bit before we wrap it up here. You can see with that thought process how that can become a hindrance in a marriage. Because if you're an achiever and you don't feel like you're living out in an area, say it's the bedroom, you just think, well, no wonder he watches porn, because I stink in here. I'm terrible, and watching porn will make her feel that way, by the way. But that can cause one of two things. Either you put stress on yourself trying to be better in an area, that's the only way to get better is to not have the stress, or it'll cause you to give up.
Yeah. I think giving up is what most people do.
And most people will give up. Yeah. They're just like, why even try?
Well, and I think sometimes we think about failure too as I can never fall, I can never have a defeat because that's going backwards. No,
Mhm.
it's one step forward, three steps back. No, no, no. I think the different way to look at that is Micah 7:8, when I fall, I shall arise. And in
Yeah.
Proverbs, it talks about a wise man falls 7 times, but he gets up the eighth. And I think that's how you look at it. It's failing forward. It's not failing backwards. It's not taking 3 steps backwards.
Right.
It is identifying where your struggle is and where you are being challenged. And is this challenging my growth, or is it challenging something that's completely outside of who God's called me to
Right.
be? Because if that's what it is, that's a whole different conversation.
Right. You know,
And you need to walk away from that.
if it's truly 1 step forward and 3 steps back, that tells me you're not learning anything
Right.
in your steps back.
Yeah. You're
Because it
hitting that
shouldn't
same
be that
pothole
way.
all the time.
Right.
Same road.
It
Yeah.
should be 2 steps forward and maybe a step
Yeah,
back.
exactly.
We should start taking ground sooner or later. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, hopefully this helped today to kind of help people to learn how to design an environment and to maybe in a different way than you've ever thought about it before, but help your
Yeah.
spouse have an environment for growth and learn some things about each other, learn what they like, what's recharging to them, learn some of those things that we don't always talk about as being a marriage mandate.
Yes.
But see little things like this that can really, really, really shine up your marriage.
Right. So we'll wind it down with that. What we want to tell you now is that we can help you with that. We can help you through what is called the Marriage Reboot, and it's developed by Married for a Purpose. Greg and Julie just did a fantastic job developing this system, and we can help you find that purpose. We can help you find that how to develop that environment and
So
create that marriage that you've always wanted.
give you the language to speak with each
Yeah.
other.
And so, yes, so highly would recommend if you are interested in developing that environment, think about the reboot. It'd be awesome. Another tool that we've thrown into is what Nick and Amy has out, the Ultimate Intimacy app. We want to encourage you. It's free. Go your app store on your iPhone, download it, and just start playing with it. I mean, you'll start finding all kinds of little things in it. It's really
very
helpful.
Environment. Very, very classy.
Yeah. So go to foreverwithpurpose.com and you can find everywhere we're at on social media, and give us a like, a follow. Send us in what you thought of today's episode. And if you have any questions, we'd like to do other podcasts over your questions. And we will be with you next week on the next Pillow Talk with Grant and Stephanie.
Have a great week.
See ya. Can't find the stop.